Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco is in the house today. Should they stay or should they go? He's got a piece up right now at InsideTheBirds.com that takes a look at that. Stay or go? What's he say? We'll talk to Andrew DiCecco today as we take a look at Football at 4 for this Thursday edition. The free agent period kicks off March 15th. We're under a month before these guys can walk out the door. A lot of tough decisions to get into, and we're going to get into it now with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com as he joins us here for Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, what's up, brother?
Mike, doing well, my friend. How are you?
All is well, man, and we got a lot of decisions to make with this Eagles team here, so let's dive into some of the tougher ones and get your thoughts on what's going to happen here. So we'll start with maybe, I don't know if it's the toughest one, because this guy's going to get to kind of write his own decision here, and that's Jason Kelce. If he wants to come back and play, the team will certainly have him. But what is our feeling on Jason Kelce? Will he be here next year, or do we think we've seen him snap his last ball?
Well, Jason's been one to sort of leave the door open. I mean, last season had sort of lingered his decision a little bit. So I mean, for the sake of the exercise, I think he's going to be playing another season. And I think that you're going to want to find that out sooner than later, because that's going to obviously alter what you do probably in the draft. I mean, just going through the offensive line, Mike, they're really light at guard. And if Kelce doesn't come back, you're going to be light at center too. I mean, the Cameron Tom would be the backup to Cam Jurgens. So you're going to want to find that out obviously sooner than later. But they're going to have some light. They're not going to have quite the depth that they had in past years on the offensive line. Obviously, I think Isaac Seumalo is on his way out, and Andre Dillard's actually going to be a more substantial loss than some may realize.
Yeah, Dillard, we'll get to him in a second. Let's go to Seumalo because he's obviously a free agent. We're looking at some of the free agents that could walk out the door. Seumalo, it's not that they want him to walk out the door, but explain why you think it's probable that he will not be here next year.
Well, for one, he's 29 years old. He does have an injury history, and the Eagles do have Cam Jurgens, who they've invested a second-round pick on. Obviously, if Kelce comes back, you have to figure out what you're going to do and get him onto the field, which to me would be a plug-and-play option at right guard. Also, Seumalo is going to have quite a few suitors. He's played at a high level, one of the more under-discussed players on the entire Eagles roster, and I think that when you look at a team like the Arizona Cardinals, who are losing Justin Pugh, or I should say Justin Pugh and Will Hernandez, and there's a couple of other guards that are up for free agency as well, it would make a lot of sense knowing that obviously Jonathan Gannon saw him firsthand. Possibly with the Colts would be a good fit with Shane Steichen. And that's just two teams right there. Obviously, when you look across the league at the state of offensive line play, teams are in dire need of a player of Isaac Seumalo's caliber. So I think you're going to see him make a little bit more money than you may realize on the surface.
Yeah, Seumalo, a starter. Andre Dillard, a backup here, but kind of an interesting guy. I think he's actually, Andrew, going to get paid pretty well to be a starter someplace else. But you would imagine the Eagles will not be able to bring him back.
No, it was a luxury to have. Obviously, he was a first-round pick, so you would expect him to be starting. But as it were, it was a luxury to have him on the roster, knowing that he's a capable left tackle. He could step in and fill in. He provided some quality snaps at guard. He's 27 years old. He will be, and I agree with you, he will be a starting tackle in this league. You look at, I just mentioned the state of offensive line. You're going to see him probably someone's going to overpay for his services. And just knowing that, how valuable the Eagles, how valuable he is on the Eagles offensive line, being able to step in, play left tackle, should anything happen to Jordan Mailata, play some guard. I mean, he's a really valuable player, and obviously he never lived up to expectations here, but I do think that he's a starter on a lot of teams in this league, so I think that you're going to see him go get paid.
All right, let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. There are three key guys on the line, Kelce, obviously, and Seumalo, both starters. Dillard as kind of the key back up there, because Jordan Mailata has missed a handful of games over the last couple of years that Dillard has had it. And Dillard, by the way, did start to play some guard as well in this last year here. So he has become a little bit more versatile, but that's always kind of been the knock on him. But let's go to some of the skill players and get your thoughts there. Let's go to running back, where Miles Sanders is obviously a free agent. He has expressed he wants to come back. This one's kind of interesting to me because of the depth at running back in free agency this year. Will he have a market? Will he take less money to stay? So kind of give me your breakdown on what's going to happen with Miles Sanders.
Yeah, he's an interesting case, right? Because he wants to be here. He said, I believe that his words were, I love Philly. I love Howie Roseman. I hope he loves me too, right? So it takes two to tango. So you got to hope that the feeling's mutual if you're Miles Sanders. Now, he's probably going to command, I would think, about $6-7 million, maybe $7.5 million. I mean, he's coming off a career season, double-digit touchdowns. He stayed healthy, ran tough, played through some injury. Obviously, he had the left knee seemed to be an issue down the stretch. He battled through that. I thought he ran a lot tougher, was more decisive, ran with more confidence this season. So teams are going to see that, and he will get paid. He's still young. I think he's just 25 years old. Now, if you're the Eagles, do you want, and you have all these other needs, Mike, can you justify paying a running back? It's not a premium position. Or would you rather go into it with Kenny Gainwell, who's making a fourth-round pick salary, and maybe draft a running back who you're going to get them on a rookie deal as well? And I think that when you're at the Eagles, and every move here really matters, especially when you're trying to probably retain as many players as possible and maximize what you have to spend. So I don't know that would be a wise investment to bring Miles back, even though you saw the season that he had. He's well liked in the locker room, but I just don't know if that's going to be a top of the priority type of signing.
The other back is Boston Scott, and I know he seems like a minimal guy, but is he a guy that they should, target to bring back and maybe give him a bigger role?
Well, I don't know if he's a bigger role type of player, but he has stepped up when called upon and delivered, in spot duty, some tough running. He had that 9-yard catch and run in the Super Bowl where he put a couple guys in the blender. That was sort of a Boston Scott, the epitome of what Boston Scott can do. Now, I don't know that he's a volume runner. He's not someone that you want out there for a significant period of time, because that's sort of much like Kenny Gainwell. I think that sort of diminishes their value and what they're able to do. I think they're really good in spot duty. Gainwell more so. I think he's going to be a running back 2 this year. But I think that Boston Scott's shown that, one, he's a capable kick returner, but he's also somebody that has a nose for the end zone. He's a smart player. He's a team-first player. He's not going to break the bank to keep him there. So I think bring him into camp, and he's always found a way on the roster. So he's the kind of guy you want in your locker room. So I think he stays.
All right, we'll talk with Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 from InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, the Eagles have a lot of decisions to make. Let's go to another one that seemingly under the radar, but Gardner Minshew. They love to have a veteran quarterback as the backup that has experience. We've seen over the years that they value the backup quarterback spot, but Minshew probably will move on, which means they're going to have to figure out what to do with the backup quarterback spot. It's a spot we know they value. So do they try to keep Minshew? Does he have a market? How do you kind of see the backup quarterback going in free agency?
Well, going into the season, it looked like Gardner Minshew was going to be among the quarterbacks that were at the top of the heap as far as vying for starting jobs. But now he went 0 for 2 in his starts. He very underwhelming against the Saints in a game that was an upset loss. So I think he sort of hurt his value in terms of free agency. Now, do I think that he'll get an opportunity? I think there's going to be a team that's going to want to roll the dice and at least bring him in for a chance to start. They're not going to hand him the reins by any means, but I think he's going to ideally look for a place where he can at least compete with someone to be a starter. And that he's 26 years old. He started quite a few games in this league. So, I mean, you kind of know what he is. He doesn't really move the needle. He's not going to elevate an offense, but he can capably navigate one. And I think that he's going to get an opportunity. Knowing how much the Eagles prioritize the backup quarterback and how much they value that, though, I think that they might go in a different direction, maybe look for another low-cost veteran, probably look to the draft to add another arm. I don't know that Ian Book is the number 2. I know they really like him, but I think he's more of a project player and not someone that they view as the definitive number 2 that can be quality insurance should something happen to Jalen Hurts.
Interesting story will emerge there. We'll see. Just a couple names. Jacoby Brissett played for Sirianni. His name will probably be thrown out there a lot. I think you look at a guy like him as possible backup, but those guys won a lot of money. We know the Eagles paid Chase Daniels a ton of money to be the backup a couple years ago. They don't have that kind of cap ability with all these guys here. So let's go to the last guy on offense, and that's Zach Pascal, and he's kind of interesting because he didn't have a huge role on this team, but a lot of people wondering if Quez Watkins needs to be replaced. Do they say to Pascal, hey, we want to bring you back and give you a bigger role, or is the third wide receiver a spot that they need to kind of reevaluate?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So I really like Zach Pascal. I personally sought him out at the Super Bowl as somebody that I wanted to talk to because there's so many things that he did that did not show up in the stat sheet this season. Doing the dirty, gritty blocking on the perimeter and freeing guys up on different routes for first downs and touchdowns. It does not show up on the box score. Selfless player. He turned in the most modest season of his career, but he was a leader, and you even saw when he scored that touchdown against the Steelers how excited his teammates were for him. Really good guy in the locker room, brought that dog mentality mantra over with him from Indianapolis. He's the guy who really originated the whole thing. So I thought that he was a really strong instrumental piece in that locker room that sort of went under the radar. But that said, I think that if you're Zach Pascal, you're 28 years old, you're probably going to want to go somewhere else where you have a more prominent role on offense. In the Super Bowl, he had a couple of catches. He played 21 snaps. Obviously, he played Quez Watkins assumed the lion's share of those snaps. But I thought that Pascal had more of a role down the stretch, but probably not what he envisioned when he signed. Remember, when he signed, that was before they got A.J. Brown. So he was sort of looking at that possibly number 3 spot. And then obviously he had to adjust and adapt, much like as in the pecking order. But I think we'll probably go elsewhere. As far as Quez Watkins goes, I think that's going to be really interesting because I don't think he should be handed the 3rd spot at all. In fact, I thought he was miscast as the 3. He's more of a 4 in this league. He really took a step back and regressed this year. You have to wonder how much confidence the coaching staff has in Quez. Also, the quarterback, how much confidence does Jalen Hurts have? I mean, if you look at it, Quez has cost his team games, and you look at the Dallas game, not fighting for the ball, 2 interceptions there, the fumble against Washington, that key drop in the Super Bowl most recently. So, I mean, I think he deserves an offseason to sort of try and get right, but he's just certainly going to have to fight for his spot, and I think he's probably going to be a 4 next year and probably have to contribute on special teams.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Let's look at defense. A lot of decisions over here. Start off with a big one, James Bradberry. I know many people think he's out.
Yeah, I'm a big Bradberry guy. I have been all season long and throughout his career. Really good zone player. I've mentioned before, he's probably one of the smartest defensive backs I've seen. That said, I think if I'm guessing, I think he's going to be in the ballpark of probably garnering $12 million a year. He'll probably get a 2-year deal, I would imagine. But I just don't see how the Eagles are going to be able to do that, knowing, and we're going to be talking about some other defensive players that I think they're going to prioritize. But I look at James Bradberry, and I think he's a fit in most teams, and it could be a good 2. I don't think he runs particularly well, and I think teams sort of try to exploit that throughout the season. I thought he had some trouble with some speedier guys, but just a sharp-minded player. I could see him, Mike, going to a place like Arizona, who has Byron Murphy, whose contract's up, Antonio Hamilton, the other corner. There's another corner there whose contract's up, and he flourished under Gannon, so that to me would make a lot of sense. I don't see him back.
Another interesting guy, of course, on that side of the ball would be, let's pair them together, the 2 linebackers, Edwards and Kaiser White. How's this kind of play out? Do they like one more than the other? Is one more expensive than the other? Are they both gone? How do you see the linebackers in free agency?
Well, if I were to guess, Kaiser White's going to be he's going to be the much more cost-effective option. Between the 2, I would say, maybe $3.5, $4 million a year. They're right around the same age. That said, you have Nakobe Dean there, and I think they sort of have a similar skill set as being that pass coverage linebacker, and I think that they can do some things in terms of blitzing that TJ Edwards can't. But, depending on the defensive coordinator, I think you might want to turn somebody like Nakobe Dean loose. And I think Nakobe Dean would best complement someone like TJ Edwards, who I think probably the Eagles are going to want to retain him, Mike, knowing that he's a homegrown guy. He just had his best season. He wore the green dot. He's a leader. and he's a tough player. I thought he would really set the tone in a lot of games, really good against the run. Obviously, he can get exploited a little bit in the passing game, but I think that's where having somebody alongside him like Nakobe Dean would really play into it. Now, a lot of people have mentioned to me, do you think he would go to Arizona with Gannon in that defense? Well, it depends on how they're going to run that defense, but there is a guy named Zaven Collins there who is their Mike linebacker and sort of would render TJ Edwards, essentially a non-entity in that defense. So I don't know that would be a fit there. But TJ Edwards is going to get paid. He's coming off a career season, and there's going to be a team that really likes what his hard-nosed style of football, and thinks that he can be a defensive leader on their team. And I think that the Eagles are going to have to do a little competing there. But I think that if the price is right, they're going to want him back.
Interesting to see what happens and develops with the linebackers there. All right, we got two guys on the defensive line. Let's go with the tackles. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Linval Joseph, too, I guess, if you want to throw him into the mix. On how many of those guys will be back, because obviously Fletcher and Hargrave played a lot of snaps, and Joseph played a ton when he got here.
Yeah, he did. Joseph quietly started a bunch of those games down the stretch. He didn't play a ton of snaps. That's not really what he's equipped to do at this stage of his career. To me, he might be one of those players that they say, call me in November if you need me. Right? I don't think that he's going to be someone that you're going to bring through training camp. He's not going to go through all that. But he was an effective player, Mike, when he was here. I thought he really helped reinvigorate the run defense the midway point of the season. But I think that Hargrave is going to be a priority, and I think that he's going to. He's not going to come cheap, right? This is a guy that had 11 sacks this year, but I think he's even more important when you look at what the Eagles have behind him. Let's say he does he does leave. Let's say Fletcher does leave. Okay, well then you have Jordan Davis, who still has a lot to prove, and he was a Jonathan Gannon pick, right? He fit in his defense, but there's no telling how Jordan Davis is going to fit and what role he's going to play in someone else's. And then you have Milton Williams, who I am very high on. I thought he played exceptional in the limited amount of snaps that he did. 4 sacks this season, made a couple of splash plays. But there's a lot of question marks beyond that. Marlon Tuipulotu, right? He's coming off an injury. So I think it even makes it even more important to try and retain either Fletcher or Hargrave. Hargrave, to me, has much more in the tank. I think he's going to probably command, $18, maybe $19 million. And I think they're going to want to find a way to keep him in-house. So I think he stays. I think they find a way to make that work.
That'll be a big one, Hargrave. And you mentioned, well, that's an interesting conversation. Is the new coordinator, does he look at Jordan Davis and have a role for him? That's something. And I wonder if that connects to why they talked to the Georgia co-defensive coordinator yesterday to try to get some ideas for him.
Right.
And Nakobe Dean, by the way.
Yeah, and that's exactly what piqued my interest, because as I mentioned, you're getting a new guy in place. Who knows what Jordan Davis's role is, right? He was drafted fit Jonathan Gannon's scheme. So there's a lot of question marks there. Do you want to go into a season with a guy who another coordinator may view as just an early down player, and Milton Williams, and then not much behind them? Then you put yourself in a bind where you feel like you have to address that early in the draft. Whereas if you find a way to make it work with Hargrave, it opens up so much more optionality.
All right, Andrew, couple more, obviously, because I got so many here that we want to dive into. And you look at, I guess Brandon Graham is kind of in the Kelce mold if he wants to come back, or do you think that the team just says, look, we just don't have the room anymore?
I think BG sticks around. When you look at someone who's been around as long as he has, what he means to that locker room, the example that he sets, and he's still really productive, by the way, a career season. I think you want as many of those type of guys in your locker room and on your roster as possible. Really positive guy and really embodies what it means to be a Philadelphia Eagle. I think they find a way to keep him in-house.
All right, last couple guys here, and they're the safeties. It's Epps and it's C.J. Gardner Johnson. Obviously, you got 2 starting safeties that you just replaced the 2 starting safeties you had before with Rodney McLeod and Anthony Harris. Do you going to have to replace one or both? Or none?
Well, I think ultimately they're going to have to just replace the one spot, and I think that spot, Mike, is going to be Marcus Epps. I think they're going to prioritize C.J. Gardner Johnson when you look at his age, but also the positional versatility that he provides. There's an extensive injury history with Avonte Maddox, and having someone like Gardner Johnson in place who can effectively play the nickel. That's primarily what he played with the Saints, and being the ball hawk that he is, and sort of growing into a leadership role. He brings swagger to the defense, and he's been the most vocal guy. You see, he's got the vlog out. I think he just really enjoys being here in Philadelphia and adds a lot to that locker room and that defense, which is really vital to have that kind of vocal personality on the back end as far as communication goes. Epps is a really solid player, great story. He was claimed off waivers. He was the guy that got hurled over by Ayuk, and he got burned in the playoffs by DK Metcalf, and really evolved into a quality, tough, hard-nosed player, limited athletically, but very smart, sharp kid. That said, I think that there's going to be another team that may surprisingly overpay for him, and it won't be the Eagles. So that's how I see that playing out. And they're fortunately, they fell into Reed Blankenship, and really Dillard Wilson, I mentioned him last week, he really has done a great job in developing him into a player that they can move forward with and feel confident as being a starter potentially at this level.
All right, there you go. There's a list of the Eagles' unrestricted free agents, which begins on March 15th. There's a little quick thought on what may happen there. And then, of course, don't forget, other teams have free agents that the Eagles could fill some of these spots. And I think this defensive coordinator thing is going to be interesting. Does the new guy come in and completely want to change? Do the Eagles want to – I mean, Dillard Wilson, I guess, would have a defense similar to what John Gannon ran, right? We would imagine that he would have a lot of the same principles. So that will be interesting to see how that all kind of unfolds. And then, of course, the draft after that we will certainly dive into with Andrew here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, man, good stuff. As this offseason is going to be really interesting.
I can't wait, man. It's never a dull moment. I appreciate the time, Mike.
All right, but there's Andrew DiCecco here from Birds, of course, Inside the Birds, and we've got him on Football at 4 on Thursdays here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill.